in order to be at a board level and understand tech, you actually need to understand how it works. You need to just not go, there's a black box and what goes on in there I don't need to know about. You actually need to look in the black box and understand how it works.
Yeah. You get an intimate insight, sort of picture moment of the business, its challenges, its opportunities, and you have a rare opportunity to impact that.
Really exciting, literally finding people who are going to change the world.
You know, what other industry could you launch a business today and in 5 years be worth $1 billion? You're understanding the impact of technology at a boardroom level, and it affects the vision, it affects the operational procedures of the organisation, set from the top.
Welcome to this edition of Leading Through Uncertainty. I'm Kate Burns, Chief Operating Officer at Odgers. This series is part of our ongoing effort to explore how senior leaders are navigating complexity, change and opportunity in today's world. Through each conversation, we uncover real stories and strategies from leaders navigating change in every corner of the world. Welcome to Leading Through Uncertainty. Today, we're focusing on technology, a sector that moves faster than any other, with Mike Drew, Head of Global Technology Practice at Odgers. Mike, it's great to have you here. Can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, Kate. So as you say, Mike Drew. So I lead the global technology practice for the firm based here in London and have been with the firm for coming up to 10 years now. So it's been a wonderful 10 years and really enjoyed it. 10
years, very long time. So what drew you to this kind of work initially and actually then also especially into the tech world?
So it's a long story. I'm going to cut it really short. Because I don't want to bore you or anyone watching this. But so I studied law at university.
Good choice.
And during the third year of university, I had a chance to go into industry. And I just happened to get a placement in executive search. And I realised quite quickly that search was better suited to me than law. And when I came out, I graduated with a law degree. I came out, I sort of went straight back into the executive search arena. And at that time, it was sort of late 98, early 99. The tech boom was happening, and it was just the busiest part of the market, and so I fell into it really, like probably most people do.
I can sense though the passion from sort of the excitement and what keeps you passionate about it.
Well, there's two things really. So there's passion for what I do as an executive search professional. So you know, I love working with clients. You get a really intimate insight into their business, usually at the most critical point. Because appointing leaders, you know, for businesses is one of the most important, you know, decision boards CEOs make, generally speaking. And so you get an intimate insight, sort of picture moment of the business, its challenges, its opportunities, and you have a rare opportunity to impact that. And I think that's really unique. And then I also operate in the technology industry. So, you know, for me, I've been passionate about it since I was a kid. The impact of technology, and I get to live and breathe it every day. And what's nice about it is it's not really one industry. It's you know, dozens, if not maybe even hundreds, when you think about the subdivisions that sit within technology as a whole. So every day is very different. And I say to people in my team, you know, when they join, just get comfortable being uncomfortable, because you know, no search is the same, no industry, no subdivision of the industry is the same. You know, one day you could be talking about cybersecurity, the next day you're talking about artificial intelligence, the next day you're talking about a business to consumer platform. It's all very different.
It's very interesting just listening to you talk then about the kind of the tech side. That sort of, I understand that bit, that you're talking about the passion about executive search. I can see you getting really excited talking about it. Is there a particular moment, or when you think of that, you know, or a particular time, something you did or someone you recruited or something that happened that kind of really sees how you sort of shapes how you see the executive search world?
Well, I think they're interlinked, search and the tech industry, because you know, ultimately I operate in the search industry, but I do it for tech companies, and so you know, I sort of refer back to my sort of earlier point around being in a very privileged position to make impact on companies at whatever stage of growth they might be at. And if I sort of refer back to one particular example, I probably won't mention their name, but let's just say they are one of the leaders in artificial intelligence globally. And they created an algorithm which was deployed into one of the oldest medical issues, which was the scenario of protein folding. And they deployed the algorithm, and very quickly it solved a 200-year-old issue of understanding how proteins and small molecules affect the body. And that was important because it would enable advanced drug discovery, things like cancers, motor neuron disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, etc., with a real hope that through using this algorithm, you would be able to find drugs much faster to impact people that suffer from those ailments. They created a new company essentially to drive the new platform that would enable that particular solution. And we were responsible for appointing the foundation leadership team. And the challenge that we were given was find individuals that are more advanced than the most advanced AI company on the planet. And it was a pretty significant challenge, but we managed to do so. And it was a real combination between the technology practice, our life sciences practice run by Chris Hamilton, and our government practice as well. And that was the beauty of Odgers running that search, because, as a collaborative organisation, we were able to sort of join up our thinking and execute the search.
Really exciting. Literally finding people who are going to change the world.
Very much so.
We've done a series of these conversations, and we've spoken to people who are function, executive search, sort of CFO. We've also looked at sectors. You're a sector specialist.
I am.
So what are the kinds of leaders or businesses that you spend most of your time with?
So the thing that really attracts me to the search industry, but also the tech sector, is no one client's the same. We work with such a broad array of organisations, from seed-funded, early-stage scale-ups that are bringing something really innovative to market for the first time, and organisations that have been in the industry for 20 plus years and that are market dominant and have a market cap of $1 trillion, as an example. And the sort of leadership types that are required for such a diverse set of clients is very different. What's required in a scale-up is very, very different to what's required in a operationally mature global business that is probably responding to disruption rather than actually creating disruption itself. So when you think about the scale-ups, what the question is, what type of leaders are required in those organizations? Well, there isn't one size fits all for scale-ups. I mean, it's so much of it is situational. But, you're typically looking for visionaries. So people that have the capability to horizon scan, see the future, understand the impact of the technology, and then plot the pathway to get there. They need to have, a high degree of risk taking. They've got to be capable of backing themselves and believing in what they're doing and getting others excited by it. And so setting a vision that others can believe in. And so communication as a result is super important when you're that sort of leader, being able to really tap into, your vision and then be able to spread the word, so to speak, to others in your organisation so that they will commit their lives and their passion to your passion. And that's super hard when you're in an early stage business.
So rapid fire round.
Okay.
Now.
Yeah.
So one word answer only.
One word answer only.
Well,
okay.
We'll see where we get to.
Okay.
So what comes to mind first? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
AI or quantum?
AI.
Speed or precision?
Both.
Oh, that's one word, but you can't say both as one or the other. Explain.
Precision.
Okay.
Because without precision, speed doesn't really matter. You can be fast to market in finding people. You can be fast to market in getting your product out there. But unless it's precise, speed is really quite irrelevant. So I think speed and precision have to go together. That's not a one-word answer, but I think you wanted my explanation.
Okay. Product market fit or visionary disruption?
Visionary disruption, but again, product market fit is super important too. These are tough ones to choose between.
Build the rocket or take it to space?
Build the rocket.
Yep.
Do you want me to dig into that?
Okay, yeah, dig into it. I'm intrigued by that.
So we use this metaphor when we're talking about early stage businesses and founders that essentially building the rocket, and it's quite a unique skill set that founders have to have a high degree of risk-taking appetite, a vision that they believe in and can get others excited about. And so when we talk about building the rocket, it really is referring to that early stage scale up environment. When we talk about flying in the stratosphere, it is an entirely different skill set that is required. And if you extend the metaphor, you can probably appreciate that those pilots that are great at circumnavigating the moon, aren't the same engineers and scientists that build the rocket. So, if you extend that in that way, you can think about how operationally mature business leaders are vastly different to, risk-taking startup founders.
So the tech world is already a world of disruption, of change, of uncertainty. Layer on top of that the additional uncertainty of the world today. What do you think, specifically in the tech sector, what forces are creating the most uncertainty right now?
So to your point, I think there are three uncertainties in the tech sector, which are ultimately also impacting every other industry as well. So number one is the disruption and innovation that's coming from artificial intelligence. Everyone is seeing it in their lives in one form or another, but it's causing as much fear as it is excitement. And with fear breeds uncertainty. And people are genuinely worried about how it will affect their job, how automation, which is driven by AI, will come into place and potentially remove jobs from organizations almost altogether. And then you overlay that with, geopolitical issues, which we won't necessarily be specific on, but everyone knows what I'm talking about in terms of what's happening around the world. And then you overlay that on top of financial and economic instability. There is a lot of worry at the moment around where we're going as an economy, as even the human race, and how all these elements are going to affect us over the next sort of 3 to 5 years, and how we're living in and breathing it right now.
Mm. It's interesting, you think, when you talk about AI causing fear in a sector that understands it probably better than anyone else. I think the fear from other sectors perhaps comes from not understanding it well enough. I think probably the fear from the tech side comes from almost understanding it too well, realising what's going to happen to jobs. But also you'd expect the tech sector to be more comfortable in embracing AI than perhaps other sectors.
It is 100% more comfortable in embracing the opportunities of AI, but there is still that uncertainty of what it will lead to, for sure. But there's inherently more optimism about the opportunities that we can gain from artificial intelligence than perhaps there is the fear. And you look at how most people consume AI right now. It's through ChatGPT as an example, or other models of that nature. But actually how AI will improve the lives of people generally is less well known. And if you talk about how, say, for example, healthcare is going to really benefit from artificial intelligence, it's a seismic shift in healthcare that will create so many new efficiencies and opportunities to spot, diseases, ailments far earlier, and enable doctors and medicine more broadly to create the right sort of treatments that will hopefully see certain things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and maybe even most cancers, over the next perhaps 20 years, be vastly reduced in its impact. And that's really exciting. And so most people see AI at a superficial, almost consumer-based level, but people within the AI industry or the tech industry see how it's being applied in other industries and get excited because of the human endeavour potential.
So forces, we've talked about sort of uncertainty, disruption just generally, geopolitical instability, economic. How do those forces change? I suppose I'm going to split into two. What boards expect from their leaders, and then secondly, what the organisation needs from its leaders.
Yeah. So boards are really rapidly understanding the need for digital fluency, and the need that you need either the entire board or members of the board to represent the sort of digital ecosystem and how it impacts their products, their solutions, their marketing, their strategy, and then replay that internally to the senior leadership team to impact how you might pivot off the back of that. Or in an ideal world, everyone gets to a level of digital fluency where you're understanding the impact of technology at a boardroom level, and that filters into the organization, and it affects the vision, it affects the operational procedures of the organization set from the top, rather than it just being one individual that's sort of a lone voice amongst others that are not as educated on the subjects as they should be.
It's interesting. I think someone said to me, a while back now, 10 years ago or so, in order to be at a board level and understand tech, you actually need to understand how it works. You need to just not go, there's a black box and what goes on in there I don't need to know about. You actually need to look in the black box and understand how it works.
Yeah.
So that kind of idea of just having one person on a board with digital fluency, I think that's good. You've got someone who knows what they're doing, but equally I think everyone has to have a degree of understanding, which as you get into more and more technical sector and world, actually can become quite hard for a board.
It can, and I agree with you that there is a need for boards to really level up on their digital fluency, whether it be in the UK or globally. I don't think that boards need to be technical in their understanding of how technology impacts their organisation or their products or their people. I think it's understanding how the interaction between the business and technology has an effect. And that is as much of a people and a change issue as it is a technical issue. And so understanding that element is far more important than understanding the technical piece.
And scaling in tech, why is it so different to other sectors? We talked a little bit about this, but the types of talent you're looking for, different shapes and sizes of scale. What would you say about that?
What other industry could you launch a business today and in 5 years be worth $1 billion? Technology is one of those industries and probably the only industry where that's the case. And you can do that with a relatively small number of people. And so scaling in technology is really all about time to market. It's about, taking your innovation, which can often be rapidly disrupted in its own right. So there's a sort of healthy paranoia that founders have around, I need to get this out and I need to get this out quickly and I need to get it to the right people quickly before I'm disrupted, before the market changes. So scaling in tech companies, really has that as its blueprint, that sort of healthy business paranoia. And everything then revolves around it. It revolves around, how you market, how you structure a go-to-market, your sales, your marketing, etc. Product market fit is super important. You don't want to have a solution to a problem where there is no problem, if that makes sense. So having product market fit, which is really addressing market need, is super important. And technology as an industry sort of recognizes that almost better than any other. And so the scaling journey really is about being a visionary at the outset, really seeing a market before most others don't. And let me give you a couple of examples. If you take, he's not everyone's cup of tea, but if you take Elon Musk, if you think about what he did for the automotive industry, he saw that EVs and technology with inside cars was the way forward, way in advance of General Motors, Ford, BMW, and all the others. And he set out essentially creating a technology company that manifested itself in an automotive company. And that changed automotive altogether and accelerated electric vehicles, by decades potentially. And then if you take someone like Jeff Bezos, who set up Amazon really as a way to sell books online and quickly realized that that was the way that e-commerce was going. And now he's created, arguably one of the biggest tech juggernauts on the planet, recognizing, that human behavior is the mother of all inventions. And that's exciting. So when you think about scale-ups, they tend to have visionary leaders that can see a market before it exists and then have a deep passion and a healthy paranoia that if you don't get it to market quickly, you'll lose out and you'll be disrupted.
How does leadership change as the business, as tech businesses scale? What different things are you looking for?
I mean, that's a great question because in most cases, the leaders that you get right at the very beginning are normally not in place when the business becomes operationally mature, because the journey requires so many different skill sets along the way. If you think about the requirements of a startup founder, it's this almost unhealthy passion about what they're doing and belief that it is the right thing for the market at that time. And that sort of dedication to driving that into the market is kind of what makes them successful. And they are risk takers by their very nature, and they're innovators by their very nature. But then as the business matures, ultimately, some of those elements that made them great at the beginning almost become a hurdle for the business to grow at the rate it should do once it's starting to become a global business, as an example. And you need leaders that can come in and start to put structure and discipline around everything from product, go to market, to marketing, and everything else, and even the financial management of a business. Founders typically, not always, but typically aren't as strong as more professional CEOs. So you often find, and not always, but you often find founders are great for the first 3 or 4 years, and then will regularly pivot into another role in the organization. And that typically happens when investors come in and they're looking at the roadmap for the organization, and they're looking at what is needed in order to become that 100 million ARR business. And it typically means that they need leaders that can structure the organization in such a way that you get that sort of productivity that comes with scale.
One thing we haven't touched on yet in relation to disruption is quantum. What are your thoughts on what that's going to bring to the market?
So we're quite fortunate in Odgers, actually. We've done quite a lot of work in the emerging space of quantum. And the first thing I'd say is it's still a few years away from being a sort of a reality for most people. And there is a lot of work going on around the world, and there's some really surprising places that are, world leaders in it, like Denmark, for example. And they have a number of centres in Copenhagen that are real leaders in quantum. But of course, then you've got the Goliaths like China and America as clear leaders. Quantum is going to change computing. It's an entirely new way of looking at computing. And if you think about what AI has done over the last couple of years, quantum will be roller skates for AI. It will be rocket boosters for AI. And it will enable us to do things that probably quite right now we can't fathom. And so the accelerant opportunity with quantum is significant, but also there's some downside with it. So if you take encryption, for example, quantum computing will be able to decrypt any code that's out there right now in a nanosecond. So that changes the game for how you look at things like cybersecurity. And the world right now, and particularly the two superpowers I mentioned, are racing as fast as they can to be the first one to market with the commercial application of quantum for good reasons, and in some cases for bad reasons. And there is an element of quantum that is extremely exciting, and there's an element of quantum that needs some long-term safeguards around it, so that we can reap the benefits and not the negatives from it.
Just for the layman's explanation of the difference of quantum and AI, you described it to me using a sort of analogy of keys. Can you just explain that as well? Because that's really I found it very helpful in my understanding of.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about sort of computing as it is today, the biggest limitation for AI is the compute power that sits behind it, that enables it. And quantum, if you sort of extend that metaphor, really, the AI is one key in one lock. Quantum is 1,000 keys for 1,000 locks, and it unlocks it immediately.
All at the same time.
All at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so exciting. But equally, because it unlocks so many doors at so many times, there is also nefarious uses of quantum that we need to safeguard against. And there will be state actors around the world that will look at how they can use it for purposes that benefit them but nobody else. And so, in the next sort of 3 or 4 years, we'll see scenarios where quantum starts to become commercially applied, and we'll get vast benefit from it. But I think governments will also look to safeguard how it will impact the society as well.
As we're talking, I'm just beginning to think that actually, I think we're all dealing obviously with the geopolitical uncertainty and the economic uncertainty in the world at the moment. But I think, the tech sector, this idea of disruption becomes even more and more powerful as we're talking about things like quantum, and so that uncertainty piece is really big there. Where do you look for the people who lead this? How do you find? And it sounds to me like you can't look in the normal places. Or you're having to change your approach to how you find talent for this sort of uncertainty.
We are, without question. If you sort of go back 10 years, normally you would find people for technology company searches in other technology companies. I mean, every now and then there might be a left of field scenario where they come from out of industry, but typically, the experience within the tech industry was essential. And today, so many organisations have become digital and have adopted sort of a digital platform approach that means that other industries are almost as fluent as the technology industry is. And also, when you think about areas like deep tech really is about the scientific application of things like AI. And a lot of that is in academia. And so a lot of searches we're running at the moment, we're not just looking in the tech industry, we're exploring talent that sit within the world-leading universities, as an example, all the way through to cross-pollinating into industrial, where they've adopted AI really early and they've started to automate, and that skill set is applied back into the technology industry. So the cross-pollination of talent is like I've never seen before, and it's exciting because it opens up so many new opportunities for the clients that we work with. And ultimately, when you are thinking about scale-ups and startups, so many of them now are coming from our tier 1 universities in the UK. They are professors in AI in tier 1 universities that recognise that they can apply their knowledge, their skill set in a commercial sense, and more frequently they're now either staying as professors but also having a side hustle of having $1 billion company, or some of them are actually just leaving academia and becoming innovators and entrepreneurs in their own right. And that's very exciting.
So I suppose it means if you're looking elsewhere for talent, or you're looking in additional places talent, you're probably also not looking for the same, or accepting the same qualities. Perhaps they're not the same people, I suppose. So what qualities are you looking for compared to maybe 5 years ago? Is the typical tech leadership role, has that changed? Or the profile, has that changed?
I think it's changed immeasurably. And there are so many different types of tech companies today. There are businesses that are really evolved, and are global household names, and the leadership that sit within those businesses are really looking at how you squeeze more juice from a well-juiced lemon. And it's all about small increments of growth. And the skill set that's required there in terms of leadership traits is very different to what you would get within a business which is much earlier in its formation, where it's all about capturing new clients, capturing new markets, driving one product into multiple products, marketing it, selling it, go-to-market strategies, etc. So I think that the sort of leadership skill sets are really, really different when you look at those two ends of the spectrum. So, referring back to your question around has the sort of typical archetype of leadership in the tech industry changed? It has, because when you think about startups, there are so many different types of founders now. You've got the technical founder that creates the product and then requires leadership around them to market it and sell it and get it out to market because they're brilliant at the technical piece, but not so good on the more commercial elements. And then you've got really strong commercial leaders, innovators, if you like, that are by their very nature great storytellers, but technically aren't as strong and so therefore can't build the product. So what you're starting to see now is rather than founders, you're seeing foundation teams where you have a complement of leaders that come together to create the next best company that doesn't have one founder, it has 5, 6, 7, recognizing that the skill set that's needed to really grow a business rapidly isn't in one person, is typically in several with different skill sets and different traits.
We've talked a little bit about sort of almost the race to sell. So you have an idea, let's get it on the market, let's sell, let's disrupt, let's change the world. Where does trust and sort of some of those more the softer elements of leadership, I think trust is probably a big issue in the tech industry right now. How do you take people with you? Communication. Where do all of those sit in this world?
You're exactly right. I mean, trust is essential in business, full stop. But in a world where we have so many uncertainties, and AI is exciting because there's so many possibilities, but it also breeds a level of fear. Fear comes from uncertainty, and leaders today need to recognise how people feel in their organisation to really maximise their potential. And fear can be a real destabilising factor. So how do you combat fear? I mean, that's a difficult question to answer, but it's typically done through transparency, strong communication. You build trust by those two elements. And let me just sort of double down on that. So transparency is if you've got a vision and you're a founder, don't keep it to yourself. Explain it to others about what it is and why it's relevant. How do you get to you're succeeding in the market where you might see something that almost nobody else does. But if you don't communicate that to your people sufficiently, they won't follow you. So leaders today, you really find that they have to be great communicators. Because in the past, a founder could sort of, through force of personality, build a company really rapidly, and people would follow. But today, with all these elements that I'm talking about, people want to know, is there a mission? Is there a purpose? Why should I be investing my time into this particular mission when I have the opportunity to do it in many other places as well? And so that level of communication, that level of trust that you build through that strong communication skill set is absolutely critical. So if you ask me what's the number one skill that a founder or a CEO has to have right now, is their ability to communicate. Mm.
And this sort of, we've talked about, the race to get the product to market. We talked about the disruption, the finding the people, not necessarily where you should think you'd normally look for them. It's a world full of very complicated sort of decisions to be made. How do you provide a safe harbour in that particular storm? Someone's setting something up, they're under a huge amount of pressure to get things done. They need to find the right people. People are absolutely critical.
I think the reality with Odgers as a firm is we're very much a specialist organisation. We have the benefit of some size now, where we have practices for most functions and most sectors. And through that level of specialism, you have a high degree of intimacy with your markets and an understanding of what's affecting it and where the people are. And most importantly, you have the ability, as we talked about earlier, to cross-pollinate by working with other practices to bring a different answer to perhaps the same problem and give the client, that level of reassurance that because you're an expert in your space and you know the market well, and come back to the point on trust, you have to build that trust with the clients so that they enable you to do your job properly and challenge them, but also, make them see different angles and different avenues that they wouldn't have thought of before. And quite often the best outcomes for our clients are the ones that they didn't anticipate. They have a set perception on what is good for them. And quite often it's one-dimensional. It's not three-dimensional. And our job is to bring the 3D to the problem. And I think that's what Odgers does particularly well.
And how,
is that all right?
That's great. And how do you stay ahead of? I mean, we've just described a world that's changing so rapidly. Odgers has got to be on top of that as well.
Yeah.
How do you stay ahead of that?
I don't sleep very much. I think I come back to a point I think I made earlier around being comfortable being uncomfortable in the tech industry. And I say to researchers that join the practice, it doesn't matter that I've been doing this almost 27 years because the industry's changed so much. And you can be as much of and I hate to use this term, but an expert in your space that I am in mine very quickly, because what you will learn today will probably pivot within 12 months. And so you're learning something new all the time. And so I think, in our industry, you've got to be comfortable learning almost every day. And we have such a privilege in many respects with the people that we meet that every meeting is a learning opportunity. That I love asking questions. It's perhaps because I am a recruiter, but it's also because I'm genuinely curious about what's happening and what impact that particular founder or that particular business leader is having on the market they're trying to address, and learning from that. And the tech sector, sounds like it's plural. It's not. It's hundreds of subsectors, which in itself is exciting. And ultimately, anyone that we bring into Odgers has to have the sort of capability to be almost sponge-like in their ability to suck up information, store it for a period of time, and then repeat it. Because ultimately what we are is storytellers.
You and I both have teenage children. We talk about it just beforehand. And one thing I flippantly say often in relation to my kids is you'll do jobs that we don't even know now exist. Do you see that already happening? Are you looking for roles that haven't existed before?
We are. And, I don't want to spend too much time talking about AI because it is overhyped in many respects. But AI is creating so many new roles in organisations. And I'll give you one example. No names, of course, but we're working with a 60-person organisation that was founded a few years ago who are really revolutionising financial services industry. And we're looking for a head of AI reinforcement learning. And, what is that? I mean, essentially what it is it's AI that trains AI to be more effective and efficient. And someone like that that we're looking to hire could easily come from academia as they could from an established tech company. And quite often when we're looking and searching for those sorts of individuals, we are looking in both sectors. And, to give you an example, there's lots of hype around Meta and those sorts of businesses paying hundreds of millions for this sort of talent for one individual. And I can tell you that that's true. This is the reality of the scarcity of the talent and the impact it can have. One individual with that sort of skill set can be worth billions to organisations. And so therefore, organisations are willing to pay for it. So it's an exciting time. It's quite scary. The numbers are huge. And where we find the talent is definitely changed from, say, even 5 years ago. But that's just one example of a role that has evolved, which probably didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago.
All this change, all this speed of disruption, looking ahead 12 to 18 months, what's going to define successful leadership in this world?
Successful leadership in sort of 12 to 18 months, I think comes down to your ability to take your organisation on a really bumpy journey. And you're going to do that through a high level of transparency, your ability to communicate why a particular path is the right path for that company, and an execution mindset that enables you to get there. Because it's all well and good setting a vision, But if you can't execute upon it, that's all it'll ever be, is a vision. So those three things, I think, are what are the sort of crux of effective leadership in the next 18 months. Being able to instill trust in your organisation by being transparent, by being able to communicate a vision, and then being able to execute upon it. Those three things. And I call it a protect and push leadership. So you want to protect your employees, the people that work for you, by creating a safe environment. But equally, you have to push them, because only great things happen when you push people to their limits. And that's the reality of where we are today. You will see in the next 2 years organisations that aren't household names today, but in 2 years' time they will be, because they'll do something exceptional and impactful. And that's what's really exciting about the tech industry.
So what are the three things you'd like people to take away from our conversation today?
The first is educate yourself on technology and more broadly AI and quantum, because it will affect everyone at some point in the coming years. And so the more you know, the better informed you are, the less fearful you will be of it. And you'll embrace it in a way which you'll see vast benefits from. I've got a colleague in the US, I won't mention his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but he uses AI almost to run his life. And the benefits he gets from it is vast. And he immerses himself in it. And he's very passionate about it. And I'm not at that level personally, but I do spend time trying to educate myself on technologies and its impact, because, ultimately it's seeping into how we live, how we work. It will change jobs, it will change industries, and that's exciting. But acknowledging that change is coming or is happening right now and is certainly going to be only increased over the coming years is part of embracing the future. And the future is AI, it is quantum. And those are the things that I think people need to educate themselves on the most. The second, I would say, is leaders, for clients that we operate with, but leaders generally across business, they also have to become digitally fluent, and they have to get to a point where they don't rely on one individual to provide the context around the impact and opportunity of being more digital. A CEO needs to be the chief digital officer of their organization. As much as having a chief digital officer is beneficial, if the CEO is only the mouthpiece for the CDO, it's not effective. So the CEO and the board need to be digitally fluent. And the final thing is, if you are all those two things that I mentioned, a rising tide floats all boats. And ultimately, I'm excited by the impact of AI, not fearful of it, because I can see how human endeavour will benefit from AI. And for me, that's the most exciting part.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. That's been a great conversation.
Pleasure.